Hello, I'm Colin Mars, editor of Construction News. Welcome to this webinar hosted by Construction News in association with HSO. So today we're going to dive into the topic of how construction, engineering and architecture firms manage their sometimes vast amount of data on both bids, live and historical projects, as well as staff. The data infrastructure in many construction, engineering and architecture firms has grown organically, with legacy platforms implemented to deal with specific individual tasks, such as human resources, business development, accountancy, and business development. But in 2024, is fragmented infrastructure creating as many problems as it solves? What are the issues that are caused by cross-referencing data held in different systems, and what impact does all this have on productivity? We're going to dive into that today with our guests, who I will introduce one by one. Firstly, we're joined by Ali Nicol, Head of Constructing Excellence at BRE. Hello, Ali.
Hello, hi Colin. I'm Ali Nicol. I'm Head of Constructing Excellence at BRE. I guess from my perspective, at Constructing Excellence, we're trying to get the construction industry to stop thinking of digitalization and digital systems as something that those clever people in the corner are responsible for, and get it digital by default. How do we use this, and how do we use it to deliver better productivity and better outcomes? So very exciting to see what the other panelists have to say.
Great to have you with us. And our second guest is Drew Waller.
Thank you, Colin. Yes, my name is Drew Waller. I'm data science lead at AECOM. My role is kind of split into two halves. Firstly, on the technical side, my team are responsible for the development and deployment of machine learning and AI algorithms for our clients, often sitting within a wider platform or solution developed by our digital team. Secondly, we also give a variety of advisory and strategy services to our clients across the AEC industry as well.
Fantastic. Welcome, Drew. And finally, I want to introduce Whit McIsaac, Global Industry Director at HSO ProServe.
Colin, thanks very much for having me. Everybody, I'm Whit McIsaac, based out of Atlanta, Georgia. I'm the founder of an organization called AEC 360. We are the largest industry division of an organization called HSO. And HSO is a global Microsoft partner working out of 60 countries. And specifically, I've been working with Microsoft over the last 20 years. And what we've built is a solution that sits on top of the Microsoft platform that is designed very, very specifically for construction companies, architecture, engineering, building product manufacturers that help them leverage the Microsoft Dynamics business platform. So in today's session, what I hope to be able to do is to provide some technical insight from the business applications perspective, along with Allison and Drew, and very, very much appreciate having an opportunity to join you today, Colin.
No, great for you to be able to join us today with that global overview and the perspective of working with such a big software provider. So let's kick off. I think I'll come to you first, Ali, just as an overview. In your work, your current work and even past work, what would you see as being the main challenges businesses have with data they have, particularly if it's held in different places, and what the internal issues that causes?
I think interoperability of data is a big issue within any business, but I think within the construction sector, I think as a construction industry, we have to collaborate. We're often working on data sets that are, no one organization delivers a construction project on their own. So we need to get that interoperability across our own systems, other people's systems, naming conventions. There are so many issues here as I start going into them. We do get quite technical, but I think if you take those technical solutions aside, because Drew and Whit are much better qualified than I am to talk about those, I think one of the challenges that we've got is how we trust data, how we actually trust that the data is telling us things that we aren't normally used to hearing. So I think there was a lot of the pandemic was really good at getting people to start using and trusting systems. There's been a little bit of a dial back on that. But I think there's a lot there around trust, around how people don't think the digital systems are for them. And actually, they're for everybody across the organization. I think, we shouldn't just
Yeah,
BIM managers, for example.
absolutely. Yeah, and I guess I mean there'll be some firms even where the digital, where there's a high degree of digital literacy, but the staff are dealing with an HR system that's built with one provider, and then project management's on a completely different system, and there's some benefit from having those two linked together. Is that something, Ali, that you've come across as causing issues in the industry internally in businesses?
I think not necessarily. Well, it's always causing issues in lots of businesses, and I think it can be. We at BRE are actually going through a huge digital transformation at the moment, and it takes a lot longer than you think. You just think. I mean, as a lay person, when it comes to how digital systems operate, you just think you get a system, you'd load it on your computer and off you go. But really, there was so much more stuff in there. And actually, what's been brilliant about the process we've been going through is that we've actually had to go through all of our processes and ask the question, is this actually fit for purpose? Do we need to be doing it this way? And it's all part of that modernization journey. And I think it's not as simple as you might think, and it takes a lot of time to make sure that your business is actually fit for that digital solution. And it's not that you should shoehorn the business into a digital solution. It's that you should actually ask, are we doing the right things as a business in order to take maximum advantage of those digital solutions?
Great. So Drew, you as a consultant, you work for a major consultant who has conversations and needs to hold data on all sorts of different types of business as well as its own business. What are the challenges that you find in terms of interoperability of data?
Well, I think Ali put that exceptionally well, to be honest, in her response. The challenges are everywhere, and they are very numerous. We have issues where some clients are looking, I suppose, internal to themselves, so looking at their HR data, their strategy, their kind of their own operations and how they might optimize, let's say, pushing resources out to different parts of their organization or getting them on particular projects and things like this. Yeah, we also have problems sometimes, in construction, in architecture and engineering with delivery data as well, and how that's stored. I think BIM managers were mentioned before. This is not unique. There are lots of positions across the industry where people might be, let's say, storing architectural data in Autodesk Construction Cloud, or let's say linear infrastructure data in something like one of the Bentley systems, like iTwin, for example, and making sure these all mesh together in the appropriate ways to solve the problems and look for efficiencies that often the clients are trying to doing is a huge challenge. And it's all well and good to say, let's get AI to solve this or that. And I don't want to bring the conversation straight into AI. But we actually find it's the data engineers, and even before then, it's the business analysts and the kind of strategy level decision making on how do we start connecting this data together and making sure it's of appropriate quality is just the most important steps before we want to get to this long distance goal of running everything with AI.
Yeah, because that's the thing, isn't it? I guess sometimes, Drew, sticking with you for the second, we'll bring Whit in shortly. The historical progression of some of these systems hasn't been driven by strategy. It's been driven by, oh, we need a new HR system. Oh, there's this provider doing something. So are we now at a stage where there's a maturity of the market, which means that we've got the best opportunity now to know what is required on a kind of holistic level in a company?
Yeah, I would like to think that's the case, certainly. I think each system independently was often driven by cost as well. Businesses may just look at the bottom line and go, well, this is the cheapest resource in all of these areas. But then perhaps as they're going through their own digital transformation journey, they might bring in more members of staff who have a digital focus. And these will all be crying out to try and fix these issues of everything being separate, having to go through separate like agreements to get access to APIs or the data that these systems might hold, bring it all together. And at some point you realize the inefficiency of doing that kind of thing and having to do it for so many different systems wastes a lot of money. And suddenly one comprehensive solution, or connecting all of these different things together to really see the bigger picture, becomes so much more important. So I actually think it's the digital transformation journey that organizations are going on often makes them realize the inefficiencies of having everything so decentralized.
Great. Yeah, we'll come on and explore some of that in a bit more depth in a second, but I'd just like to bring Whit in here. You've got a global overview. We've been talking to a UK mainly audience, and we've got some UK guests, but you see this on a global level. So I just wondered if any of that chimes with things you see that are common to all countries, or whether there are the UK is suffering alone here.
The UK is not suffering alone, Colin. I promise you. We have an opportunity across all the continents to work with construction organizations, and this issue of data and siloed, segregated data. The processes are getting better, but it's going to take some time for the open systems approach to connecting these systems really becomes a viable day-to-day solution for these organizations. So from our standpoint, there's two primary challenges associated with business applications when it comes to finding work and winning work. And one is the systems are way too complicated. As Ali mentioned, they're built by the smart guys in the corner that are technical without an appreciation for the lowest common denominator. Who do we have to make this system applicable to? The second is data. And if you don't have data in these systems, it doesn't matter how good your AI is, doesn't matter how good your application is, nobody's going to have confidence in working it. So from our perspective, again, doesn't matter what continent we're working on, if we cannot find a way to connect up to these other applications and these other solutions to be able to harvest and integrate data into these systems, we can't provide a single view of the client, a single view of a project, the practice and project intelligence that's necessary to be competitive out in the market today.
So interoperability of data is a huge issue. We're talking about, it's already been mentioned once, if we're talking about linking up different data sets, we'll come on and talk about the quality of data in the first place. But just on that interoperability issue, we had one of the pre-submitted questions from Simon Merrick, which chimed, I think, with the main, or one of the main themes of today, which is standardized data formats. How when you're integrating, this comes up again and again, when you're integrating data systems and you've got different data formats, what tools are out there these days that can help you with firms with that problem?
Yeah, so that's become its own industry now, right? The ability to create scripting tools that are connected to synchronization engines, and frankly, they're interim solutions, because we still see SQL-based on-premise solutions out there in the marketplace, lots of them. So it doesn't matter how good the wonderful cloud-based Azure hosted solutions are, there's got to be a mechanism that allows us to take 20-year-old legacy proprietary industry-based applications, extract that data, get it into a format that can be incorporated and integrated into the balance of these solutions. So it's a juggling act, but our approach, solutions are built, they ride on top of Microsoft, and we spend the large percentage of the early discovery and diagnostic stages trying to identify where's the data, what's the format of the data, where do we need to get it to, and what's the format need to be there. So it becomes a data exercise way more than a software development exercise. And from that standpoint, if everybody knows that going in, then we've got our marching orders, and success is highly, highly achievable.
Okay, that's sure. It might be worth at this stage of taking one step back and coming around each of you, and just highlighting some of the data that firms in this industry are collecting that, if linked together, would improve productivity. So maybe we'll go around in the same order again. Alison, where do you see the biggest benefits coming from, different data sets talking to each other?
I think some of the biggest benefits will be around standardization, KPIs. We did an analysis of KPIs and we haven't got fully to the bottom of it, but we got hundreds of KPIs, many of which are trying to do almost the same thing, slightly the same thing. Different clients will ask for different KPIs, so they'll be asking for something. So what the objective of what they're trying to achieve is the same.
Yeah.
But they're asking their supply chain to deliver that information in slightly different formats. And of course, what happens with slightly different formats is you've pretty much got to go back to basics every single time to make sure that you've got the right information, using the right methodologies, etc. And I think we need to sort of have a way of, we talk about things like data lakes. That was a big thing a few years ago. We know that AI is a big thing, but we really need to get our heads around what we're asking for, because from one of the conversations that we had recently around performance measurement was actually there's a real sort of fatigue within the industry. There are people who are fed up with trying to give 3 lots of data on the same project, and they don't know what it's for. They just know that they've got to collect the data. And, we've got to move from just collecting data to having actionable insight from that data so that it can actually improve our productivity, rather than potentially increasing the amount of things that we've got to do on our projects, which aren't actually helping us to deliver that end goal, but actually getting the data right will help be productive.
Fantastic. Just at this stage, I should say to the audience that if you want to submit questions as this discussion's progressing, you can do so at the bottom of your window, and we'll try and have a Q&A session at the end to answer any of your burning questions. So moving to you, Drew, in terms of that kind of, I think, I don't want to misparaphrase Ali, but she was pointing towards the importance of being very clear at the outset about what data you are actually using and what data would be useful to you as a business. Where do you see the biggest gains to be had in linking data?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think Ali's pretty comprehensively covered, if we consider the operations side of an organization. We often, for our clients, are looking at the delivery side. So actually what's going on in construction. For us, two of the big drivers that we keep coming back to, and I must admit, I pride myself that I try and prioritize these kinds of projects, are looking at sustainability and then looking at health and safety as well. So going back to talking about structured data as well, one thing we have constantly found with trying to do projects like working out a more optimal design of a building to minimize embodied carbon, if the materials that are collected in that Revit model don't align with something like Uniclass or one of the other sets of materials that have libraries of embodied carbon, trying to get results and then therefore the opportunity for optimizing that and reducing the carbon footprint of the building just becomes very difficult. And no matter how clever the natural language processing algorithm we put together to try and connect those dots, it just doesn't always work if the data going in isn't good enough. So structuring the data and having a set schema that aligns with particular requirements, that is just so important. So sustainability is one that I think we see a lot of opportunity for. And then health and safety as well. I might save the project example for later, but we do have a couple of projects that are things like connecting Internet of Things sensors and telematic sensors together that might come from different providers that have different structures, different schema, and trying to marry those together and leaving enough fields of high quality data that we can produce some sort of algorithm for for improving the situation is often a challenge. I don't begrudge the data engineers who spend a lot of their time trying to solve that issue.
Okay, yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't dive in now. We'll ask Whit in a second about his experience, whether all this is chiming with him, but it might be useful to illustrate your point there with that example and what the challenges are of pulling that off.
Yeah, of course. So in this particular example, it was on the railways. There was a series of sensors next to the railway to look how they might buckle or be displaced, rotated in some way that is obviously not what you want from a train track. So these sensors, I think there were several thousand of them, send back feedback every few seconds just on what the state of the track is. And then where the displacement from where they were exceeds a certain threshold. Organizations like AECOM, although I think it's a consortium with a few other consultancies as well, have service level agreements to go and basically review and check out what is going on with this particular case. So previously, one of the maintenance engineers would just have to keep trawling through all these different sites or all these different platforms for all the makers of these different sensors, and it took them a very long time. And truth be told, some of those service level agreements were not being met. People were not investigating these quick enough just because they had so much to try and look at the same time. It just wasn't working. So we built a tool that effectively used data from all those sources, brought it all together, one dashboard that people can review, but also an email notification system that would go to the relevant party to say, look, something strange is going on here. Please go and investigate. And all the SLAs are now met. And I think that example can be reflected in just the operations of a company or looking for efficiencies and optimizations, in that everything becomes so much more possible when you connect it all together rather than just wasting time with all the different platforms.
And just quickly on that, before we move on, what were the main challenges of doing that, in terms of linking that data?
Well, unfortunately, they're not exciting challenges. It's all very specific on trying to map fields or columns in your tables that are slightly but not quite different, that actually represent very similar or the same things, but don't literally have the same structure. So nothing very exciting, but the kind of things that the data engineers really enjoy for some reason.
Yeah, it kind of echoes what Ali was saying a bit there about
Absolutely,
KPIs. Just very similar information that's kind of telling you the same thing, but it's just structured differently. Wait, does that all ring a bell with you from your experience across the globe, or are there other areas where you think there are other benefits for firms? I mean, obviously we're talking about benefits for firms, but there's clearly, from the last example, benefits for public safety in that one. So the effects aren't just financial. But yes, what's your experience with?
Yes, so I've been at the airport when the rails have buckled, and I've been stuck for hours, right, during the summertime. So but I'm absolutely intrigued by the virtual construction and the Internet of Things. And when you take a look at our world in the business application side, it almost sounds boring, but the reality of it is, to your original question, we need data from the ERP system, from the project management system, from the HR system, from Office 365, from custom databases, be it health and safety or special virtual construction type scenarios. What we have to be able to do to be successful is we have to be able to identify and aggregate data from those systems and bring them into a central location. Ali mentioned data lake, which used to be the term. Today, what you'll hear in the marketplace is the concept of a dataverse. And what we've architected and built over the last probably 6 or 7 years is something called a construction dataverse. So what are the core fields of information, and what are the formats associated with those fields? And then where does that data come from? Bringing that data together takes these platforms and turns it into business intelligence. And it's not just about pipeline management anymore. It's about understanding where we're successful, where we're not successful, who we need to partner and team with, and who we don't need to partner and team with. How do we put forward the appropriate people with the best experience and expertise and credentials to be able to demonstrate that we're the right group to be carrying out these projects.
Because traditionally, correct me if I'm wrong, but the HR information that you're talking about there might have been held on in one place on one platform, and then the pipeline, the business development stuff would be separately. But those two areas, by bringing them together, what are the, I guess it's a question, what are the benefits of bringing those two areas together within a business?
Yeah, so there's really valuable information in that HR system. You know, we're not looking for compensation and benefits and things along those lines, but we do want to know who's been with the organization for X number of years, what their role is, what their roles have been in the past, their academic track record, their previous work history. I mean, that type of information is invaluable when we start looking at our project intelligence to identify which of our fee earners, which of our professionals are the ones that we should put forward for this rail project or this arena project or this airport scenario. So having the information from that HR system on our employees, another really important component in today's world is diversity. So how do we understand our diversity and how to put that diversity forward when it's required through these bidders?
How many firms are you seeing? What's kind of proportion of firms are you seeing that get that importance? Obviously, there's a degree of people taking that message on board and seeing the value in it. But is it a message you're having to kind of explain to people?
You know, 3 years ago, I would have said yes. We would have had to have explained and tried to get them to understand. Today, frankly, the large percentage of people understand it. They don't know how to get there. Yeah. They need the path, they need the direction, they need the platform, you know, they need the best practices. But people understand that there's some very sophisticated organizations out there that are using technology to grow their business, to expand their business, to protect their existing clients, to team better. And unless these groups are interested in adopting this digital transformation, as Ali mentioned a little while ago, they're going to struggle because this technology is powerful at these stages.
Yeah. Before we've managed to get through half an hour so far without too much focus on AI, but I do want to come on to AI. But quickly before we go back, Ali, you mentioned quality of data earlier on. So, I mean, this maybe sounds like an obvious question, but in terms of leveraging the power of your data, what is the importance of getting good data, and is the construction industry in a place where it does have good data, do you think?
I don't think we are. I think we have got pockets of organizations. We've got pockets within organizations. We've got some excellent organizations that are doing amazing stuff with data. And we've got an excellent projects and programs. So we've got, you know, there's things like the work that's going on with the MOJ on prisons, where they're actually demonstrating the value that data brings in productivity terms and actually in helping deliver better outcomes. So the whole digital twins program that's being implemented there is really delivering benefits. So I think we've got pockets of really good practice, and then we have got pockets of mediocre practice. And then we've got just people who are not, they don't see it's for them. And I think what we need to do is sort of cut through some of the mediocre practice. And I think I think sometimes people have been a little bit missold information and solutions in the past, or oversold solutions in the past, that has made them a little bit jaded about, or they've gone in not fully understanding that they're not just paying for a solution, they've actually got to do a lot of work themselves to get into this. You know, it's not the cost of the system, it's the cost of training your staff, it's the cost of your staff getting their existing systems, getting, you know, almost doing an amnesty on all of those spreadsheets that we've all got. I've got some. But, you know, who doesn't? But, you know, we have to, we have to start getting all of that into the right places so that we can actually start to leverage AI, because I don't think we're going to get to there's, AI is based on high quality data to drive those decisions. If we're driving those decisions based on, I don't know, 10% of the potential data, and that's all skewed in one way. I mean, I was listening to this fabulous program on Radio 4 about how AI uses Reddit quite a lot for its natural language programming. Women don't use Reddit. So actually what it's doing is sort of using a particular demographic and making decisions around a particular demographic. And actually, if we do that in construction and just focus on the people who are good with data, we're going to get a skewed view on what the actual picture is. So
yeah. So what can be done on the ground to help encourage people? I'll stick with you, Ali, for the second, to encourage people who are the ones that are actually providing the data. How would you encourage people who, as you say, may have had bad experiences in the past and just kind of think this whole thing's a waste of time?
I think we've got to demonstrate what's in it for them. You've really got to get down to that whole psychological reason of why you should do this. You've got to bring people with you. If you try and enforce it, they're just going to shrug their shoulders and go, oh, here we go. I'll ride this out because I've ridden everything else out. I'll just do what I've always done. I remember talking to a young graduate who'd just gone through university, been trained how to use lots and lots of systems, got into her first job and was told, oh yeah, that BIM stuff, that's loaded on the computer, but we don't use it. Don't worry about it. And how dispiriting, but really dispiriting that hey, it's on the computer, so somebody's paying for a license that they're not using, but also B, that you're taking all of this progress and trying to dial it back. So we need to get a way of getting everyone along that journey. So, because there is a risk that you've just got a group of people who are really comfortable, but we've got to get everyone else into that position of comfort. And there's some people that probably never will get there. And, we might find other ways to deal with them, but those are strategic decisions, but that's last resort, I guess.
Drew, you were talking about IoT, Internet of Things, ways of collecting data, which kind of takes the human and the motivation out of the equation. But presumably you are working with data that requires some human input as well. But where do you see the challenge there? How do you see that being solved in terms of increasing the quality of the data that firms are working with?
That's a good question. So depending on the example, quality will either be better from a person or better from a sensor or a computer. People and computers are better at different things. I think one fantastic example that is outside our industry but is often used in this context, and is another AI example, I'm afraid, is doctors spotting particular types of cancers in scans. Now, a computer was, I think, really good, or perhaps gave too many false positives, and the doctors perhaps gave too many false negatives. What this means was that when a person was sitting through and reviewing image after image after image after image, they might miss a few just because of the mental, how drained they are from reading so many. Yet an AI model that was reviewing the same thing would occasionally err on the side of caution and would diagnose something that it wasn't. So I think off the top of my head, and I don't remember the numbers exactly, so apologies for that, but it was something like the computer was about 99% accurate when they had a lot of images going through, and the human was about 90%, but they made mistakes in different ways. What that meant was that actually, if you ran all of this through a computer and then got a person to review the responses that were given as yes, there's something here, it became 99.9% accurate because the person had much fewer to review, therefore they focused more, and they were better at making sure they got those absolutely right, because they were better at it than the computer, but they could just not do it as quickly. So I think to answer your question on quality, it's finding those synergies, and those synergies be completely different depending on what the example is, but finding those synergies where people are used for the people tasks and computers are used for the computers tasks, and making the best of both worlds really is what works well. One strategy is often called like a bookmark strategy. No, sorry, bookend strategy, where a human will start a task and they'll put in the appropriate prompts, or they'll set up an algorithm in a way that does the job that they want. But then they also have to check the outputs. So by that way, yes, a computer might be doing some of the like boring, mundane, monotonous, repetitive tasks in the middle. But a person has said, you know, this task is something we should do, because a computer doesn't know what tasks need doing. And then they check the responses because they know with common sense what is accurate, and can review things that are also things like safety critical as well, because this is well, I think you should go without saying that's pretty imperative.
Yeah. And does that same thing apply to, because you're kind of talking about analytics or analyzing the data, does the same thing apply to the collection of the data, or is that a slightly different case example?
I think it would be a little bit different, to be honest. I'm struggling off the top of my head to think of a good example where humans collect the information. Perhaps it might be on, again, things that humans are good at. So actually, I can think of an example. We've been talking to our stakeholder engagement team, who spend a lot of time interacting with the public. If, for instance, they want to build a new railway station or a new section of road, they'll have these stakeholder engagement sessions to talk to the public that are local to the area about what they're planning to do, what the positives are, and why this is a scheme that the local authority are wanting to permit. So as part of those sessions, the stakeholder engagement team do a lot of human interactions with the people there to try and gauge their responses to some of this. And then what they call codify the responses. So it's effectively talking about the emotional response of the person, how well they perceive the situation. And that's just not something a computer is going to be that good at. Sure, you can run a model on some video and try and work out what emotion they're feeling, but it's just not the same as again, using people for emotional intelligence, what people are really good at. And so that is an example, I think, of where actually humans bringing the information or collecting the data is so important, because it's such a human task. Whereas if we then go to the railway one, we don't want someone sitting there staring at the track with a magnifying glass, waiting to see if the rail slightly moves. That's clearly a computer task. So it's finding the right tool for the job, as ever.
And wit, I presume that's stuff that you're seeing all the time. But coming back to kind of common standardized data formats, you mentioned just now, so I'm jumping slightly back, but you were talking about legacy data, which companies have a lot of. Is there a different approach needed for that? And then other things that firms should be doing to make the most of the data that's coming in the future, by avoiding it being higgledy-piggledy in the first place? So are there kind of two approaches, or is it a one approach system that you think is needed?
You know, the overall premise is the same. You know, the actual execution of the different pieces is different. But the first thing I'd like to do is suggest we need to turn this into a series of webinars, because we could talk for hours about the type of stuff that Drew and Allison were just speaking about. But you know, if we talk about data quality, you know, in the business applications world, user adoption is absolutely the utmost. You know, if we don't have user adoption, then the implementation is going to fail. I talked earlier about the importance of data associated with these platforms, and unfortunately, for the people that are out listening to this program, too many of the people that are involved in the selection process, the RFPs, everybody's focused on what's the functionality of the application, what's the user interface, you know, what platform is it built on. The reality of it is, if I don't have good data, and I don't have the necessary data, and I don't have a data quality management platform that's in place to be able to support it, people aren't going to use it. And user adoption today is not defined by who types data into a system. It's based on who consumes this data. So my recommendation is the data piece of these implementations and these business systems is extremely important. And without the proper strategy, the likelihood of running into challenges is significant. So from my standpoint, data quality drives user adoption grows these implementation successes.
I think you used the term business intelligence earlier. I think what the point you're making that I think is really great, and I completely agree, is that business intelligence is not the Power BI dashboard that people look at with the KPIs on it. It's the whole package with the data in the back end that enables that dashboard, and connecting everything together is so important for that business intelligence.
Yeah, Drew, we used to talk about the iceberg scenario, so everybody can see the peak that sits above the water, but below the water, there's a massive amount of data that's connected to be able to give us that top view, right?
And it's kind of a single dashboard, it seems to be what you're describing. Is that also important in a business? So you can go to one place and you're always going to the right place, rather than thinking, oh, I've got to open this app. Now there's just a slight millisecond of kind of, oh, it's a bit of a hassle.
Colin, without turning this into a commercial, Microsoft has really given us a spectacular platform for building dashboards that are relevant to specific types of users, right? So one dashboard doesn't fit everybody, but if you have the ability to easily configure and implement dashboards that fit the right type of user, that applies directly to user adoption and consumption. And so it's the right tool for the job, needs to be put in place for this. But in today's age, having the ability to bring up a dashboard and then dive deeper into that dashboard to extract that information that sits below the surface, it's standard technology now, and technology that's available via Teams, via Outlook, via mobile. I mean, that stuff is here now. We just need to make sure we have the right data, and we're keeping up with the quality of that data.
Okay, just another reminder, we've got some questions that are coming in, but people who want to submit have still got time to submit questions for the Q&A session, which is going to come up. I think it's probably time, given it's 2024, to move on to AI. So I'd kind of danger potentially. I think Ali was making the point earlier on that technology on its own is not the solution, and people still have to work to get good quality data to those systems. But we do have AI, which is developing, or certainly was developing at a rapid pace, and probably still is. Where does that fit into the equation, do you think? Maybe start with Ali and then go around again.
I think we're at an interesting point with AI. I think where it fits now isn't necessarily where it's going to fit in 12 months, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And I think we need to be quite, not careful, but I think we've got to look at it. We've also maybe got to communicate it in the right way. I was really lucky. We went to a digital creative agency who do loads of work in gaming, etc. And we've all remember you put on those VR headsets? It was all about augmented reality a few years ago. And the experience was like really bad. And you're like, oh, well, that's not that, that's never going to take off. The stuff they had was amazing. You actually felt like you could actually then start to see how this could be used. And I think we've got to not run before we can walk. I think kind of like we kind of leap to where all the cool industries are at with this stuff without realizing that, we deliver complex things, and we've got a really fragmented, complex industry delivering those complex assets. So we've got to do the groundwork first in order to allow that AI to come forward. But also, I don't think we should be trying to oversell it too soon, because I think that's what happened with the AR stuff. It was all a bit clunky, and then it's very hard to then visualize what it could be like. So I was completely blown away when we went to Unit 9. We're actually doing some research projects around AI with them as part of the consortium. I don't think we're allowed to release details on the one that we're working on at the moment, but we're looking at things like trustworthy AI. How does it, how do you get that robustness into the data that you can actually trust it within a construction environment? So there's some stuff that's developing. As I say, I think it's just we don't actually know where it's going to take us. And that's quite exciting, but it can be quite scary for people.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess it's important. There are some kind of concerns with LLMs, aren't there, about hallucinations at the moment, and in a safety critical environment, you do not want mistakes to creep in that could be life-threatening or even bottom line threatening. But clearly there is much potential there. What do you think in relation to the use of data, Drew? Where do you see AI going? And are you, I presume everybody's looking at AI for their business at the moment. So
yes,
where do you...
yeah, data science lead, that means that my responsibility is absolutely doing that for AECOM. I tend to be mostly client focused rather than developing our own AI strategy.
Yeah.
But I still kind of get a look in both ways on that. I think what Alison really well described there is the technology hype cycle for virtual reality there, about how we first all got this idea of, oh, we're going to be wearing headsets real soon. Everyone got really excited about it. And then we all kind of saw what was there and was like, well, actually, it's really heavy. It doesn't sound great. When I look around, it's a bit slow. And people kind of gave up, and we kind of went through this disillusionment. But now, because the technology is caught up and everyone is now, walking around with these just phones in our pockets that can have crazy computational processing power, suddenly all of these technologies become much more impressive again, and they're actually delivering what we wanted them to in the first place. And this hype cycle is very common. It's something we're going through with AI now as well. We're right at the very top of the peak of when everyone's hyped about it and excited, and we're trying to see what we can make work. And it's not perfect. Especially, I would like to talk about like large language models here. I think machine learning as a object recognition and things has been very well established over a number of years. Huge number of use cases. I much prefer doing all of that, but especially when we're calling AI now, large language models seems to be what people just refer to when speaking about AI. It just doesn't always deliver what we want it to. And the truth is, people are going to become disillusioned with that pretty soon. It's on the way, and a lot of people are kind of already there when they try and extract large amounts of information from documents. Sometimes these things are exceptional at picking out specific details, but not always great at getting things like numbers out of large parts of text, right? Or reading documents that have very complicated formats just often doesn't quite come out right. If you ever try and get Copilot to write you an introduction to something, occasionally it's great, but if you really dive into it, it doesn't always ever quite say what you want it to. Therefore, you spend longer trying to sort the prompt out than you actually could have done by just writing it. And this disillusionment is coming. But what that means, much like VR, as was just described, it will come back again when the technology catches up, because this technology is advancing so quickly. And we will be able to do all of these things that we want at some point. And it's just going to take a little bit of unhappiness with large language models, is my honest upcoming opinion. And then we'll begin to pick back up. And in the same way that VR now, if you put on the latest Meta Quest or whatever, is very impressive, that is how we will feel about large language models and AI going into the future.
That's interesting. Yeah, we find that in our business, actually, because of the potential there for LLMs to enable the creation of so much more content is very exciting. But then the experiments we do, if there's an anomaly somewhere, if there's one anomaly, it means you have to check everything.
It doesn't mean that things like predictive analytics or building an intelligent management system, network optimization, pulling data out of historic sources, these are all very effective and very well proven machine learning
Mm,
algorithms, what
mm.
used to be called cutting edge AI when I started my job.
Yeah.
But I've even now heard called traditional AI, which was pretty gut wrenching to hear. Um, but yeah, that is all very much the same. We'll still deliver optimizations, efficiencies, improving safety. Many of the tools we talked about today operate on that basis. But I
Mm.
do think for large language models, we've got a bit of a dip coming. I would just like to say, while I'm speaking, because I'm aware something we haven't mentioned yet is actually security, data security as well, and that's such a fundamental and important piece. If we're talking about HR information, general business operations information as well, this often contains PII, personally identifiable information. In the world of floating spreadsheets everywhere, where everyone's trying to optimize their own thing or work out a calculation, just the amount of spreadsheets you'll see lying around organizations with information that should not be there and could just accidentally be sent to someone, or someone's accidentally changed something without realizing. It's just not secure. And I guess wrapping things back to where we were is one way in which connecting data just saves that potential issue if your data flow is effective and secure.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Thanks for raising that one. So Whit, do you want to try and deal quickly? I know that, as you say, we could run 3 more webinars on the question I'm about to ask you. AI, where's the potential there, first of all, and specifically the role of LLMs in sorting out some of this unification of data that we're talking about?
Yeah, so none of us have ever seen a technology that's accelerating the way this AI is. I mean, the investment and the time to use on this technology is just absolutely incredible, and it's not going to slow down, which is a really positive thing. But as Drew and Ali mentioned, there's also some negative components associated to it. So from our standpoint, we take a really pointed, focused approach to AI, and we've been working again very, very closely with Microsoft. And our approach is, how does AI fit specifically in the business applications segment for the construction marketplace, right? So Microsoft uses this term called co-pilot, which Drew mentioned just a few minutes ago. So it's not the pilot, it's the co-pilot. So to Drew's comment about bookends, somebody defines the model on the front end, the computer and the AI handles the heavy lifting in the middle, but then there's got to be somebody on the other side of this scenario. So what our group does is we work with the tools that are out there in the marketplace, and we embed those directly in the business applications. So it actually becomes an extension of machine learning, predictive analytics, cognitive search, this Dataverse, all of this information that's in-house that we're using to make good, solid business decisions based on our business intelligence. So from that standpoint, I feel that it needs to be harnessed. And the way that we harness it is specific, how construction and AEC organizations can leverage AI. And then 2, how does it affect our business applications platforms, and how can we leverage that to drive user adoption, win more work, keep our clients happier, execute better on projects, and finance and things along those lines. So harness.
Yeah. So do you think we've got a question in here from Gemma Adair. She's asking about the big construction technology trends you see coming up in in the next 5 years, apologies, in the next 5 years. I guess the obvious answer is AI will keep expanding rapidly. I presume you'd agree with that statement. But along with AI, do you foresee other trends happening in the next 5 years? It's always difficult to be a futurologist.
I think that the AI piece is obviously enormous, but where I think we're going to see the impacts of AI is going to be on the construction market data. So we all remember the Dodge and Reed construction data and I Square, all this data that's out there from all of these projects worldwide, and every geo has their different content suppliers. I think what we're going to see is we're going to see a consolidation and an aggregation of this data that's being consumed via the AI models to be able to give us really valuable information on the markets and the industries and the competitors and pricing and things along those lines. So I think it's going to be a meld of how much data do we have that we can consume using these AI tools.
Okay, I've got a couple of minutes left, and I've got another question from an anonymous attendee, which is asking, you may not agree with the premise of the question, but you feel free to disagree with the premise of the question. But the question is, with regards to project and asset delivery, what information management and interoperability standards are likely to prevail nationally and globally? So I guess I put that caveat in because you might say, well, you know, does there? I mean, I guess the question is, does there have to be one winner for standards, or could you have different standards operating, or is that just replicating the same problem? You need one global standard, presumably. Would you agree with that, Whit?
Yeah, I don't think there's not going to be one winner, as much as we would all love for there to be one winner, right? The winner is going to be open systems and shared data across the different systems and platforms. And without that, you know, it's not a forklift upgrade anymore. You know, everybody, you can't justify doing that. So there's going to be legacy systems. There's going to be best of breed solutions. There's going to be custom solutions. So the winner has to be open systems and interoperability between the data in these different systems.
Would you quickly agree with that, Ali? Oh, you're on mute, sorry.
There. Yeah. I mean, I think that is really fantastic. I think the only caveat I would put to that is we have spent an awful lot of time in the UK developing ISO 19650 for project delivery. Now, I'm going to be diplomatic because actually I think sometimes people get turned off. Why I couldn't unmute was because I was Googling to make sure that I got the right numbers. Which just shows you that sometimes it's part of that reason, you know, that codification can make it accessible to people. Which is part of what AI and machine learning and open data is trying to move away from. But I think the fundamentals of having that common approach to data is really important. And I do hope that does form part of what we get in the future. Obviously that started out as a British standard and then moved to an international standards organization recognized solution. I think one of our challenges is we all want to create our own standards because we're all a little bit special, especially me. But you know, I think it would be good if we sort of built on some of those standards that exist.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a big question, isn't it? An international standard setting body for data. There may be fans of that, and there may be people who think it's unrealistic or undesirable. But we're at the hour, so we've run out of time, unfortunately. We're going to have to convene another discussion time to talk all of that through and all the stuff that's come out with today. We've covered quite a wide range of topics there. I was trying to keep it focused, but inevitably we have wandered around the whole area, and I hope the audience has got something out of that. I'd like to thank my guests, Alice Nicholl, Drew Waller, and Whit McIsaac. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again for the next Construction News webinar.